what we do, and why we do it. The Australian Monarchist League was reformed from the Monarchist League in Australia in 1993 with the principal purpose of defending the honour of the Queen and protecting the integrity of the Crown. You see, in the early 1990s, Paul Keating was the Prime Minister. He was both a staunch Republican and a supreme opportunist. He used and kept alive the issue of a republic to detract from the real economic crisis at hand. He promoted Malcolm Turnbull and made him head of the Constitutional Committee. It was that committee which came forward with essentially the same proposal that was put to the people in 1999 following the Constitutional Convention of 1998. Therefore, when Republicans blamed John Howard for putting the wrong question to the people at the 1999 referendum, which still continues to this day, they are promoting misinformation, which is, of course, their modus operandi, particularly nowadays. Keating had no compunction about attacking the Queen and the monarchy. Whilst on an official visit to the United Kingdom in September 1993, he was a guest of the Queen at Balmoral, and he wrote about this in his memoirs, in which he says he told the Queen that the majority of Australians felt the monarchy, and of course by inference the Queen herself, was an anachronism and that it had drifted into obsolescence. Her Majesty is reported to have calmly responded, "You know, my family has always tried to do their best by Australia. I will, of course, take the advice of Australian ministers and respect the wishes of the Australian people." So the Australian Monarchist League was reformed as a lobby group, and we gathered together an amazing number of dedicated and loyal Australians, including several of high standing, such as Dame Patty Menzies, who became our first patron. And thus we lobbied politicians and confronted newspapers whenever they attacked the Queen and the monarchy. We also launched a nationwide and sometimes international campaign targeting companies which insulted the Queen in their advertisements. We have a long track record of success in our campaigns during this period, and even brought Toyota to its knees when it placed an advertisement promoting its Lexus SUV as opposed to the Land Rover, saying, "Don't worry, Your Majesty, you're not the only British export to have had its day." Directors representing the company after our campaign was launched turned up at the British Embassy in Tokyo to formally apologize for any insult to the Queen they may have made. Toyota also sacked their Australian advertising company, and the president of Toyota in Australia pleaded with me to stop our campaign. Within a short time, our message was sent out to members of the Republican movement not to attack the Queen, but to concentrate on the Constitution. Eventually, the attacks on the Queen by advertising companies slowed down and then ended. We had succeeded, but our job was not done. When Republicans came up with their slogan, "An Australian for Head of State," some monarchists devised a strategy promoting the Governor-General as sole head of state, but in doing so, they appeared to sideline the Queen. Another slogan also appeared, identifying Australia as already being a republic, a crowned republic. This was a matter of grave concern to many of our members. Whilst our Constitution does not mention the term head of state, it clearly places the monarch in the supreme position as guardian of the people's rights under the Constitution. As representative of the monarch, the Governor-General assumes the position of active guardianship. We believed that rather than push the Queen to the side, it would have been far better to explain the role that the Queen and the Crown play within our constitutional arrangements. Hitherto, we had not been engaged in the politics of the Republic versus monarchy debate, but felt the time had come to take a stand, not just in support of the Queen and the Crown, but of our constitutional arrangements as well. We became an incorporated association and restructured our Constitution, giving our membership total and absolute control over our organization. All of our office bearer positions are subject to election in one way or another, and, as many of you know, we do respond to concerns of members whenever possible. Of course, only financial members are able to participate in the elective process within each state, and we do welcome offers from financial members who may wish to become more involved in our activities. This is essentially the Australian Monarchist League that you are all involved with today. We are the largest member-based monarchist organization in the country and undoubtedly the most active. Many of our members are under 40 years of age, but all are welcome to attend our functions and activities, particularly as we now plan to resume meetings with the relaxation of lockdown procedures. We also have a vibrant young monarchist group throughout the country which organizes activities both physically and online. Why do we do what we do? Simply because we believe implicitly that our system of constitutional monarchy, with an unbiased, unfettered, and apolitical head of state in the Queen and her representative, the Governor-General, best protects our democracy and our freedoms. Unlike those who face elections, the Queen has no need to organize funding for campaigns or engage in partisan politicking. This is the benefit of having an hereditary monarchy and an appointed Governor-General as head of state, essentially trustee of the Australian Constitution. The head of government, the Prime Minister, supported by the Cabinet, manages the day-to-day running of the nation, but there are constitutional lines he and they know they cannot cross. Otherwise, the Governor General will step in to protect the interests of the people as Sir John Kerr did in 1975. We therefore have the best system possible, particularly with its inbuilt checks and balances, to ensure that our democracy and the rights of the Australian people remain intact. We welcome your participation in this webinar, and I thank you very much for joining with us. I would now like to invite Jeremy and Alessandro from our Victorian Young Monarchist branch to say a few words and also explain why they are monarchists and why they support the Australian Monarchist League. There will be time for questions both to me and to Jeremy and Alessandro after they have spoken. Thank you, one and all.
Thanks, Elliot. First of all, I'd like to thank yourself, Elliot, and Philip for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. And before I do start talking to you more about the youth movement within the Australian Monarchist League, I'd also like to acknowledge Laura Smith, who's the New South Wales Young Monarchist Chair, and also Senator Erica Betts as well, who has joined us tonight. I think given the recent anniversary that has been celebrated in our Australian history and indeed our tumultuous Australian political history with the dismissal of Gott Whitlam that was marked just last week, I think it goes to show that there is definitely still a strong, despite being a minority, a strong Republican presence in Australia. But we have also seen with recent polls as well that there is definitely a much stronger monarchist presence, especially amongst our young Australians, and indeed those who have joined us tonight and who make a part of our monarchist groups in both Victoria, Queensland and New South Wales between the ages of 16 and 31. So I thought I'd touch briefly on my own journey with the Monarchist League, and also going on to explaining how our branch in Victoria and also the youth branches in Queensland and in New South Wales as well operate in terms of running events for our members. And then Alessandro will go on to talk more about the importance of social media as a means of raising awareness for our cause, and also our roles as media spokespersons for the league. So onto my personal journey. I joined the Australian Monarchist League in late 2018 as a 16-year-old who was looking at getting more involved in politics and certainly in advocating for our constitutional monarchy, and by keeping the Queen and our Governor General as head of state. I was invited by the League to fly up to Sydney in early 2019 to take part in media training with a few distinguished guests there as well who were presenting. And I think those skills really gave me, and from those who were with me as well, the skills required to advocate on behalf of our cause and to take on leadership positions within the organisation as well. And that led me to be elected as chairman of the Victorian Young Monarchists, and as the first chairman in 2019 when the branch was formed, and Alessandro was elected as deputy chair as well. So as I mentioned, we have 3 youth branches on the East Coast with Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. And they've been running for quite some time. And we host numerous events to mark special occasions on the Australian national calendar, including Australia Day and Wattle Day, of course, which happens later in September. And also any royal visits that may take place, that we've been handing out flags, for example, and having people on the ground there to make sure that our cause is right at the forefront and is well and known to all. And I think that goes to show that when we do have royal visits, such as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex who came last year, I believe, and having people on the ground and campaigning there, it really goes to show that there are much more support out there outside of the sometimes toxic echo chamber of Twitter and other social media platforms where the Republicans seem to dominate. Personally, I've had altercations on Twitter with Peter Fitzsimons, who of course we all know as the forefront leader and spokesperson of the Australian Republic movement, and not all of those have been particularly pleasant, and it goes to show that they do like to employ tactics on social media and get their support base who are online to attack our cause and to at least attempt to come up with what they consider to be substantial arguments against our cause for the monarchy in Australia, and obviously to the detriment of their cause as well. So we have active events, numerous campaign opportunities as well. I'm personally involved in setting up a new club at the Melbourne University with the Monarchist Society being affiliated there. And it really just goes to show that young people are the future of Australia, and they're the future of advocating for a constitutional monarchy in this country. And it comes down to, I guess, three main points, which I'll mention before we conclude. The idea of educating young Australians, especially in high school, on the idea of civics and citizenship, so that they come to understand our model of state and of government in Australia, and how the Governor-General and the Constitution operates around that, and also raising awareness for these political issues, which I think all three of our youth branches do to a very good accord. And finally, it comes down to portraying the Governor-General and portraying the Queen as a good aspect of leadership. And I'll conclude on the fact that it seems that a lot of young people seem to question the idea of leadership in government. And given that my generation has lived through quite a number of prime ministers in my time, it goes to show that we've had about 7 prime ministers in the last 10 years, but we've only had one head of state and one monarch. And it's a really good test of time to show that why we need to have a constitutional monarchy in Australia in order to keep this stability. And I think that young people are attracted to this. There's a lot of distrust amongst politicians for the younger generation. And I think having this idea of stability and continuity into the future is something that really appeals to me as a monarchist, and is something that the monarchist movement needs to take forward into the future to appeal to the younger population. So I'll pass on to my Deputy Chair, Alessandro, to talk a little bit about our social media platform and also our role as media spokespersons. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hi, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Alessandro Rosini. I'm the Deputy Chairman for the Victorian Young Monarchists down here in Melbourne. The few things that I'm going to talk about, and I'm not going to talk as long as Jeremy, the few things I'm going to talk about today is social media and the media spokespersons, why as young people we support our system of constitutional monarchy. But firstly, I'm going to start off with our image. Our image as a league and as youth branches in particular is really, really important. It's important that we present ourselves as a modern and diverse movement rather than a radical group or association. And the reason for this is that it means that we don't alienate entire sectors of the community for which we could have potential supporters. And I think the Australian Monarchist League is actually doing this really, really well, where we're ensuring that we incorporate everyone from all breadths of life to participate and join in the activities in the league. And that's really, really important. But the way we expand on that, and this is what the league is really starting to focus on, and our youth branches, is through social media. Now, social media, as Jeremy said, can be quite toxic, but it also is a very effective way to communicate with our audience. And one thing I was speaking to Jeremy about the other week was about Republican myths. And I'm not sure if you've gone on to the Facebook pages or the Instagram pages of the Australian Republican movement, but they do tend to post a lot of information that could be classified as either incorrect or not factual. And that really does hurt our cause because it means that information is being incorrectly dispersed, which is obviously then hurting us. But if that information isn't correct, well, then obviously we need to refute it. And we're talking about the most effective way to do that, to refute those claims. And so from a youth perspective on social media, the Victorian Young Monarchist is really excited actually, because we're going to launch a new thing called Republican Myths, which is going to be a monthly or a weekly post that comes up with discusses Republican myths or monarchist truths, we'll put it that way, of the Australian monarchy in Australia. And I think that's really, really, really important, especially when we want to talk about, why it's important that we support the monarchy in Australia, and why we support a system of government that, prioritises stability, the idea of an impartial head of state, and of accountability. And those three principles, stability, impartiality, and accountability, are one of the few reasons why I am a constitutional monarchist in Australia. I firmly believe in the idea or the notion that in order for the entire running of government and the entire state to be functioning, we first need a stable executive. We've got that in the Queen. We've got an impartial executive in the Queen. She's not biased. She's not Labor. She's not Liberal. She is independent. And she holds our politicians accountable through the Constitution. And I think that's really, really important. And the idea for the monarchy, for me, the main principle for me is that it's there for the people. It's there for the governed, not the governors. And I think that's really, really important when we look at what type of system we want in Australia. So thank you very much. On behalf of Jeremy and I, we would love to answer your questions, and I believe I'm passing back to Elliot now.
Yes, sorry about that. Just some technical issues there. So yes, it's quite right. I'm going to, now you have an opportunity to ask any questions that you have to either Jeremy, Alessandro, or Philip. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat panel. And I've just, I think I need to unmute someone here, or mute someone. So there is speak on your computer. Yeah, thanks for that feedback, Louis. There's any other questions? There's one question, and perhaps we just need to take this offline, about nominating a book or link to provide an explanation on biblical history and legitimacy of around the monarchy. And I think it's probably yeah, a resource that we can share after. But do you have any specifically direct questions for Jeremy or Alessandro? Anyone?
I'm happy to ask the question to everyone, and I'll get people to message directly into the chat. What would everyone like to see from the Australian Monarchist League and from the youth branches in the Monarchist League? What do you think you would like to see as a member? Just put your comments in there. Anything. It could be, anything you want. And I know we would be more than happy to discuss any of those right now. So if you guys wanted to do that, that could potentially be an idea.
Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. Any ideas?
Just wait for them to come in.
Sure. And of course, this invitation certainly isn't limited to the next few minutes. If you have any thoughts and feedback, then we'd all love to hear from you. So feel free to reach out anytime. Okay, I just think we'll just give another minute or so. So we're almost out of time because we're wrapping up at 8 o'clock today. So see if there's any questions. Well, while we're still waiting. Sorry. Oh, yes. In. Okay.
Hang on.
I don't see one yet.
if there aren't any questions tonight as well, you're more than welcome to contact Alessandro and myself as well, and of course the league to learn more about our youth movements and to also get involved. And if you'd like to help out, we're more than happy to take questions and address those if you feel more comfortable contacting us offline.
Sure. So here's a question, and Philip, maybe you can want to contribute to this one too, which says, they're all flowing through now. So in the debate between monarchist and Republican, the possibility of improvement in the Constitution by something like a veto for the people to improve on what we already have. I'll just see if Philip's unmuted, which he may not be.
I'm happy to take that one from Arnis.
Please do.
Well, I guess the idea that we have to alter the Constitution through a referendum, I don't think many people would be open to almost like a veto that would need to be put in place. But we do have one little trick up our sleeve as monarchists, and the fact that in order to change the Constitution, we need to have a double majority, and that's across 50% popular vote, or 51% therefore, in order to have something amended. But also 4 out of the 6 states need to vote, need to record a yes vote as well. And given that the last referendum, none of the states had a majority yes vote at all, and that the ACT, which doesn't actually count as a state constitutionally, was the only, I guess, subdivision in Australia that actually recorded a 50 or more yes vote. We do seem to be in somewhat a bit of a safety loop there, that if a popular vote was to go ahead, which obviously at the moment polls show that is not the case at all, that there's about a 60% support for the monarchy, if not more. We do have that to fall back on, but that isn't something that we want to rely on as such. But there is definitely, I guess, in terms of talking about a veto there, we do have that option as well, that there is actually 2 steps that needs to be taken place in order for a referendum to pass. And it's very unlikely that any referendum in Australian history, let alone something as big as a republic, would actually meet the 4 out of 6 threshold for it to pass in the double majority requirement set out in the Constitution.
Okay, thank you for that very elaborate answer. I think maybe time for one more question. This one,
Jeremy, did you see my question?
I did, Adam. Yeah. Did you want me to quickly address that?
Yes, please.
So Adam sent me a question in regards to addressing engaging more people from church youth groups and young Christians. Look, I think that's a fantastic idea. If of course, people, we are we're not a strictly religious organisation, of course, but definitely more people who are welcome to come on board. If you know of any, I definitely we would love to have them on board, and if they come from a certain area,
any denomination.
Of course, yeah. You know, we're not the monarchy doesn't stand for any religion. I mean, a lot of our members do hold religious beliefs, but it doesn't mean that we go one way or the other. And I think that's the great thing about the monarchy, is that it is open to people. And
also that the Queen is the supreme governor of the Church of England.
Yes, that is true.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for those great questions. And I'm afraid we are out of time at the moment. If you have any others, then we will, please feel free to reach out to us. There are some questions which have come in. We'll ensure that we do follow up and get them answered, but we just want to respect everyone's time. And thank you once again for joining us tonight. And I think, Philip, would you like to play that closing music? And we hope you can join us in the next webinar, which will be announced shortly.